The mark of the beast is so that you can buy and sell in the Antichrist's one world government. And it requires you to worship the Antichrist, which is the reason most Christians will not take it and will be martyred. In the chapter 6, verse 9 through 11, the fifth seal.
Welcome, everyone, to podcast number 228, Renew Your Mind. With us today, we have Senior Pastor Paul Gruenberg. We have Pastor Jeremy Touroo. We have Youth and Family Director, also our Praise Band Leader, Jordan Kettlewell. Myself, Dana Hull, is the moderator, and we also have our very special guest, Cindy Miller, coming on for the next few podcasts as we work our way through the book of Revelation. So welcome, Cindy. And today in our podcast, we're going to discuss chapters 13 through 16. And chapter 13 is the mark of the beast. Mm-hmm. And I believe, Cindy, you had said this was an interlude chapter. Is that correct?
12 is history, reviews history. 13 reviews the tribulation period, the 7-year, 70th week of Daniel. And 14 is the two harvests, the reviews the Rapture and previews the bowl judgments.
Okay.
So those are the 4 interludes, 12, 13, 14.
Okay. And then we also wanted to mention that we will be attaching again a one-page, it's a summary of the book of Revelation, and it's a high overview that you can refer to as you listen to these podcasts. It's by chapter and the different events that happen in the book. So the first question, and we're really sorry, Pastor Barry can't be with us today. He's not feeling well, but he had worked through a lot of questions that we wanted to ask Cindy. So the mark of the beast, we had, our questions are, what is it? How does one get it? How does one avoid it? And if you can kind of take that away, Cindy, that'd be great.
Okay. The mark of the beast is so that you can buy and sell in the Antichrist's one world government. And it requires you to worship the Antichrist, which is the reason most Christians will not take it and will be martyred. In the chapter 6, verse 9 through 11, the fifth seal is the martyrdom of the saints. And that is probably when they reject the mark and are martyred for it. The buy-sell mark, I don't know if it's a tattoo or a chip or what, but it probably will entail the barcode, because the barcode has the 6 bar at the beginning, the 6 bar at the end, and the 6 bar in the middle. So it's 666, the barcode. And that's for buying and selling. So I kind of presume that the mark will have something to do with that.
Yeah, I remember years ago there was this debate around what that would look like. And when the barcodes came to the grocery store, there was a big, this is it, this is the mark of the beast. And then as pets got the chips implanted underneath the skin, that's, the next mark of the beast is right there. It's an electronic, something that you just wave your hand over. I mean, right now we're waving a phone in front of something to pay for it. So it's not a large leap to think that maybe one day we'll be there.
Mm-hmm. So my husband that the rates check.
and I've heard theories on that with Social Security numbers as well, that the Social Security numbers were in some way meant to be the mark of the beast. And also I've heard that recently with what they're finding, even in our DNA, that the mark of the beast might be something that's implanted into our DNA. And there's theories out there with the amount of microplastics that we consume that has actually changed our DNA. There's microplastics down to the genetic level in us and in our brains, and so you hear theories across the spectrum. I mean, there are so many different things that we could look to.
The COVID vaccine.
Well,
that was one.
The mRNA.
That's not it. Don't worry.
That was the mRNA, which is the means of or updating the DNA or RNA in the body. Is that how it works? Something like that.
Oh, dear.
But those theories are definitely floated,
Right?
as well.
Right,
I mean,
right.
there's so many of them. I think that kind of comes down to, it's these chapters that for me, when we're talking about the beast and the mark of the beast, and even, which we'll get into later, but even into chapter 14 into the 144,000, there's so much opportunity for interpretation. And so that kind of begs the question, like, how do we look at this? Are we looking at it literally, or are we looking at this in a way that we need to interpret? Are we literally going to be seeing people with a 666 mark on them, or is this something else?
For those of you who remember Gorbachev from Russia, he had the birthmark on his upper forehead, and people thought he was the Antichrist, and then Hitler before that. It's
right.
So it's
6
really
letter name. Yeah, my grandma was of Hitler was the Antichrist.
Yeah. Cindy, could you, while we're talking about the mark of the beast, could you remind us who is the beast? What beast are we talking about? I think in chapter 13, we see that there's a dragon mentioned and a beast coming out of the sea. But then in verse 11, it says, then I saw a second beast.
Right.
So would you mind talking us through the dragon, the first beast, and the second beast?
The dragon is Satan, the snake in Genesis 3 grown up.
And we see that in chapter 12, right? The dragon and the baby there. Yeah. He's
the red dragon pursuing Israel while she's pregnant with the Messiah.
Yes.
Yeah. And the Antichrist is the first beast coming up, and he is he's a human ruler, the prince who is to come, according to Daniel 9:26 and 27. He is the prince who is to come, who will rule the world, and he'll probably begin with Europe. It says the 10 horns, and I assume that will probably be 10 European nations. I don't know. And then the false prophet is the one who helps the Antichrist. And both, they're called the unholy trinity. The Satan, the Antichrist, and the false prophet. And and it says at one point it says they appear as frogs or something. But during the millennium, the 1,000-year reign of Christ, which isn't until chapter 20, all three of them are locked up in hell. Satan is not allowed to deceive the world for 1,000 years, and the false prophet and the Antichrist are cast into the lake of fire too, and locked up there. So during this time, he rules the world. The Antichrist rules the world, and the false prophet helps him, and Satan gives him his power.
And that's all within the tribulation period. So if we're looking at the tribulation, which is the last 7 years, the first 3.5 years or 42 months, because that will come up in the Revelation, are starting off with a peace accord with Israel, and then it gets progressively worse until the middle of it,
The middle is when it breaks the covenant.
Breaks the covenant. That's the desecration of the temple. And then the proverbial stuff hits the fan.
Right. My view is that the first 3.5 years will be a time of great peace under the rule of Christ. And then Revelation 6 chapter 6 verses 9 through 11 are the martyrdom of the saints. And I think that will take place at the 3.5 year mark during the desecration of the temple.
Okay.
And the saints will be martyred then, and so on.
One of the things, Cindy, that Jesus said in Matthew 24, when the disciples asked him to talk about the sign of the end times, or he said, the faith of most will grow cold. And that's always bothered me. And so he's talking, I believe, to the Christians, but if the faith of most grow cold, my question is why? Why would people have their faith grow cold in the Matthew terms, but in Revelation, it seems like they're the ones who potentially take the mark of the beast? Because if your faith grows cold, then you're really walking away from Jesus. So my question was, why would people's faith grow cold?
Okay, well, the Antichrist, the Satan is the great deceiver. In chapter 12, verse 9, it says he deceives the whole world. And I think that has something to do with people losing their faith because they're deceived. For instance, I believe that the pre-trib rapture theory is deception. And a lot of Christians will believe that and be deceived and think that they are not subject to rejecting the mark because the rapture hasn't happened yet. That's
right. And one of the aspects of that, as we talk about moving toward the mid-trib or the time when the desecration happens, you talk about the peace in the first 42 months of the first 3.5 years. And if there's peace, our faith isn't challenged. We'll watch Israel become a great nation. They'll probably erect the temple at that point because there can't be a desecration if there's no temple. Everything's going well. And then when the desecration happens and the mark of the beast happened, then that conflicts with that pre-trib rapture. We think we're going to go to heaven before any of this stuff happens. It doesn't happen. And my take on it at some level is when Jesus says the faith of most will grow cold, that those Christians that are on spiritual milk will begin to think, well, where's Jesus? Shouldn't we have been raptured? Shouldn't we be gone now? Shouldn't we be in heaven? And so when all of the difficulty comes, because now we're faced with whether we take the mark of the beast or not so that we can buy and sell, so that we can eat and live, that creates a challenge for people. And I think that when Jesus says the faith of most will grow cold, it will be those Christians that were never securely committed.
Right.
So it's important for us as Christians to be committed.
Right. 9 through 11, the martyrdom of the saints.
That's chapter 5.
That's chapter 6.
I'm sorry.
Chapter 6, verses 9 through 11. The martyrdom of the saints are the Christians that are really committed. Those are the ones that reject the mark and are killed for it.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll be gone. Trumpets are warning. Seals open information. Trumpets are warning, and bowls are judgment. So I think after the saints are martyred, God gives the world warning through the 7 trumpets. And at the 7th trump, the rapture happens. And then
and that's tied in, the trumpets, that last trumpet is tied into what Paul talks about in Thessalonians when the trumpet resounds or sounds. And
right.
So let's see. I'm going to skip to chapter 15. I want to come back to chapter 14 because we had several questions. But you talked about the bowls are judgments.
Right.
So could you, and again, I'm in chapter 15 now, coming back to 14. Could you take us through those chapters? I think it's 15 and 16, the purpose of each bowl, the judgment, what do they represent? And then tell us again, you said these are after after the desecration, is that correct?
Right. That the desecration happens right before the rapture, I think. And then in chapter 15 is the introduction, and chapter 16 goes through the 7 bowl judgments. The first one is sores, the mark, and the second and third, both, the second makes the ocean blood, and then the third makes streams and rivers blood, and then the fourth is pain or heat, and then the fifth is darkness, and I think the sixth is drying up the Euphrates, and then the 7th bowl judgment, I think, will be Armageddon, when Jesus returns with his saints and they kill the men on earth who killed them. That's chapter 16, the bowl judgments. Then 17 and 18 looks at evil from the perspective of the harlot, the evil mystery Babylon harlot.
Okay, so we'll put a hold on chapter 17, and I probably should have went through chapter 14 first, but the layers get a little confusing.
Right.
So is there anything, I guess, in chapter about the bowls, is there anything we should take more significantly? Like, is one bowl more significant than the other? Or not necessarily?
I think the last 7th bowl, the Battle of Armageddon, is the final judgment. And that'll be the killing of most evil men. I think the only ones left alive will be those who, in chapter 11, verse 12, at the earthquake, it said 7,000 die and the rest repent and turn to God. So those, I believe, will be the people that will remain during the 1,000 years and repopulate the earth.
Okay.
So, Cindy, you make a statement, for most people who understand the rapture, all the Christians are taken up to be with God in heaven. And yet you're suggesting that in the bowl or the judgments, that people can still repent.
No.
I must have missed that.
I didn't suggest that. There's no way. It says during the bowl judgments, it says they refuse to repent.
Okay, refuse to repent.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to skip back to chapter 14. That's where we had, I know you said that like overview wise, it's mostly about the 2 harvests. But we had a couple questions about the 144,000.
At the beginning.
So maybe I'll ask the questions and then maybe you can summarize and answer, give us some detail on these questions. So the 144,000, that's where Barry, he says, I have lots of questions on that.
Okay.
Who would this be in real life? And then is the 144,000 the actual number, or does it just represent?
Okay, I think it's an actual
Yeah.
number. And I think it's 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. And if you look back in chapter 7, it lists those tribes.
Right.
And the tribe of Dan is missing. You read Judges chapter 18 is the tribe of Dan. And they try to go ahead, won't wait for the Lord to give them their promised land. And they appoint and try to get their own land, which is outside of the borders of the land God had promised them. And then they degenerate into idol worship. And then Ephraim is missing, the half tribe of Ephraim. And the book of Hosea talks about them going into idol worship. And that's what happens to both Dan and Ephraim. They go into idol worship instead of worshiping God. And in the 144,000, the tribes of Israel included are Joseph and Manasseh. Manasseh is Joseph's son, and he is a half tribe, but Ephraim, the other half tribe, has been eliminated, and he's replaced by Joseph.
Okay. I think we're literally struggling with the number of 144,000 because it seems so few, especially as the population grows.
It's not all of the saved people, it's just the Jews. Well, actually, Judah and Benjamin are the only Jewish tribes. The other tribes call themselves Israelis now. The 10 lost tribes that have been found now.
So when we look at the number, the 12,000 number, is that when I think about the amount of Jews, they're in the millions. It's not just that there's 144,000. And I'm wondering out loud if many of those Jews come to know Jesus, become Messianic Jews prior to, and then the remaining 12,000 from each ones are represented by those who haven't made a decision for Christ, but then do. Because we've got a lot of Messianic Jews in the world.
Yeah, I think the 144,000, the 12,000 from each Jewish tribe are Messianic Jews. They are believers who have accepted
well, they would have to be
their Messiah.
Well, there's no doubt because the Father's name is written on their foreheads. It says they've been redeemed.
But it seems like the 12,000 are so few. Like there's really more than 12,000 Messianic Jews.
I think it's important to note too that this is. I've personally never read anything that indicates that this 144,000 is like these are the only ones who are saved, the only ones that are going to be on the new heaven and the new earth, the only ones that are going to heaven. This is like the way I see it. My interpretation, to make an analogy, would be like you've got a vast army. And we've got this special forces group that's 144,000. That doesn't mean that that's the only army. It means that this is the group that God has chosen for this thing
that particular
at this time.
At that time. Okay, and that is exactly what we were trying to understand because many people just take it very, it says 144,000. That's what it is. No more, no less. But now I just heard you say it's just the Jews. So there's all this there's groups, there's people beyond it that can be
And even within the 12 tribes, that 144,000 is going to be, like Pastor Paul was saying, will be kind of a minute amount compared to what that actual population is. But then if you look at the not qualifications, but the kind of what is special about these people, it starts in chapter 4. These are those who did not defile themselves with women, for they remained virgins. They follow the Lamb wherever he goes. They were purchased from among mankind and offered as first fruits to God and the Lamb. No lie was found in their mouths. They are blameless. So this is a very special group.
Yeah.
You know, the whole first fruits thing reminds me of the firstborn from the Old Testament. Each firstborn male was considered the first fruit of each family, and each family had to buy back that son. So I mean, this is the first time I've really put those two thoughts together.
Yeah, and first fruits suggests there will be more to follow.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we have gone through chapters 13 through 16. We're trying to do theme. We're trying to follow chapters. There's lots of layers, so bear with us. But we thank all our listeners for being with us today. We really appreciate it. We come to you from the Gaylord Methodist Church. We're located at 215 South Center Street in Gaylord, Michigan. We have 2 services on Sunday. We'd love to have you come in person. But if you can't, you can view us on Facebook or YouTube. We also have a Wednesday night service every second and fourth Wednesday of the month, more of a question and answer environment towards the end. And we'd love to have you join us for that. So come check us out. You can Google us, and that our website answers pretty much all your most questions that you might have. So thanks everyone for joining, and we will be back with the next chapters of Revelation next week. Thanks everyone.